This summer, as I said, we've been exploring these stories, are creative and quirky and curious about God. And today we have decided to focus on this story that's in the Old Testament, this far into the Bible, Ezekiel. It's a quirky story. Didn't you think it was a quirky story? About a dream or a vision that came to the prophet Ezekiel. It says that the hand of the Lord came upon me and brought me out to this valley that is full of dry bones. Just imagine it, skulls and femurs and hand bones and foot bones, all piled up in this valley. And these things certainly exist in this world. Places where armies have dumped the dead, the piles waiting to be burned in Nazi concentration camps, or the ones already burned. He is asked, "Can these bones live?" And he answers, "Only you know, Lord." A very appropriate answer. And God tells him, "Speak to these bones. Tell them, I will cause breath to enter them, and they shall live. I will lay sinews on you, and I will cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. And you will know that I am the Lord." And so Ezekiel did that, started speaking to these bones out there in the desert, this valley of dry bones. And then he hears a rattling. Tell me that wouldn't freak you out. Even in your dreams. And the bones are coming together. And then the connective tissue starts to grow, and then the flesh, and then the skin. And then God calls on Ezekiel to call from the four winds to breathe life into these slain bones, these bodies, that they may live. And he did. And breath came into them, and they breathed new life, and stood upon their feet, a vast multitude. Makes me think of that scene in The Lord of the Rings where they call upon the dead army to come join them. This visceral vision had a particular message to the folks living the story in the Hebrew Bible, a conquered, occupied land and people, where the ones deemed useful had been sent and captured and taken away to new lands so that they could be utilized in places, the many who were dead and their bodies left behind, and then remnant, the ones left behind in this war-soaked, desolate, damaged, destroyed, empty land. Ezekiel was giving hope to the ones who remained by telling this story. There could be a return to the people in the diaspora. They could rebuild. They would be the people of God. It also has meaning for every time and place. Because there is always death. There is always hope that is gone. There is always some way that an individual or a set of people is experiencing what it feels like when it feels like the end of the world, which is always happening for someone somewhere. Now hear the word of the Lord. I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. All kinds of places in our world are in need of this breath. It doesn't take long to think of them. Can these bones live, the ones who are living in a refugee camp and hope died a long time ago? Can these bones live if your homeland has been under siege for nearly a year, or more than 2 years, or more than 200, and you don't know when it will stop? Can these bones live if you are one of the people with your finger on some button in some room that causes people to die? Can these bones live? These are dry bones. Can these bones live if you left the church a long time ago because it was speaking words of hate and condemnation to you about your own body and soul? Can these bones live if you are feeling dead inside and just trying to find some life again, hoping it might be here? Can these bones live if you've been listening for a long time but doesn't mean much anymore? These are dry bones. Can these bones live if you are grieving, if you've lost a loved one to death, if you've lost a loved one in all of the complicated ways that love goes wrong? If you think you can't get up in the morning, if you find your nights are not really awake and not really sleeping, if your brain spins on what could have been, what should have been, or what you did or didn't say, or what someone else did or didn't say, these are the dry bones. Can these bones live if your church is old and dying? Can these bones live if you're embroiled in conflict? Can these bones live if your church is focusing on things that are not about God? These are dry bones. In a country that is built on consumerism, in a country that focuses on the individual at the expense of the communal, in a country that is in conflict with deep divides and misinformation, can these bones live? Only you know, Lord. Look around at these walls. We don't own this building, but over the last year, the people who go to church here have watched as the new owners started making changes. They got rid of the mold first. That's nice. Except for maybe that green couch right there. That's the last smelly thing in the room. They put in new windows in most of the building, painted the walls, put in new flooring, the blessed air conditioning, the new patio outside where we'll eat lunch later on. Someday, even the electricity coursing through these walls will be updated in such a way that we will not knock the power out when we try to make pancakes or brew coffee while also running an air conditioner. Do you know why they're putting all this time and energy and money into this building? Because it's got good bones. This is what they like to say on this old house. What realtors say when you're walking through an old house that needs some work, but the foundation is still there and the studs are still solid. It's got good bones. The base structure is still standing and can be built upon to make something really good. Good bones means you can do a lot with it, to put it back together, to breathe life into it, watch it come alive. God does that work all across the cosmos in all kinds of ways, big ways, and little individual ways all the time. And that is why we say those words every week, that God is still creating, still sustaining, still liberating us, saving us in all kinds of ways every day. In Joe Davis's poetry book, Remind Me Again, there is a poem called Ancestor Echoes that says, I walk in the strength of 4,000 ancestors who loved me into existence, who loved me through their persistence, who loved me wherever I stand. They're standing with me, and nothing can stand against us. These bones in this valley, these are the ancestors, and they're good bones. I mean, the Hebrew people, like every people of every time and place, were human as we are. And so they made mistakes, and the Hebrew Bible, or what we know of as the Old Testament, is full of these stories of the mistakes they made and what God did in response. And they are also called the people of God. And they are good bones, and they are also our ancestors, and we stand on the shoulders of those good bones. So if you are feeling dry, know that there is not a time when you cannot be brought back to life by this God who breathes life into dry bones. Hear the word of the Lord. I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live. Yes, in the refugee camps, and yes, in the virtual trenches, and yes, in the streets, and yes, in the empty churches, and yes, in the hard homes, and yes, to your life beyond that lost love, and yes to life after death, and yes to your life after losing that loved one and the future that you had hoped for. and yes to life after a difficult diagnosis, and yes in the boardrooms, and yes in the situation rooms, and yes, 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 these bones can live. And here today, as we officially welcome and install our new staff who has started, in the last 5 months or so, with Andy as our music and creativity director. He's right over here. And Pastor Michelle over here is our transition administrative pastor. We can feel the breath of God breathing new life into this place, even though we've been through trials and changes that have been hard. Even still, we continue to see new people walk through the doors and find a place in this new community, shaping who we are in ongoing ways. We know that new life recreates us every single time a new person walks through the doors. We're taking on new flesh. And in new ways, we will listen to the word of the Lord and see where Spirit Garage can join in the work that God is already doing in this world to restore and to rebuild and reconcile life all over the world where it seems like the bones are too dry to live. To be the ones who will speak the words, call in the breath from the four winds, who will tell the ones who feel like they are dust that God will cause breath to come into you and you will live. In this curious place, may God speak to us in dreams that leave us curious to know what God knows, that these bones can live. May we hear that we've been called to go out and serve a new neighbor, invited into relationship with people we may not meet in the rest of our lives, inspired to care for one another, whoever the other is. May we feel the curious breeze that is blowing new life and fresh air into the good bones that are here. And on that breath there is a word, and the word is the word of the Lord. So we keep listening that we might hear the word of the Lord, so we can speak it next to the next one we encounter who needs to hear it. Yes, you will live. Amen.